again for your previous lecture on the struggle for Jerusalem. It was both fascinating and truly informative. Before we begin, I'll ask that all participants put questions to Dr. Kedar in the chat, which we will address at the conclusion of today's lecture, time permitting. Dr. Kedar is an Israeli scholar of Arabic culture and is one of Israel's most renowned lecturers. He is the director of the Center for the Study of Middle East and Islam at Bar Ilan University under formation, and where he attained a PhD and has taught since 1994. He is a research associate at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies and is a leading figure in understanding the Arab world. Dr. Kedar is fluent in Hebrew, English, and Arabic, which enables him to go directly to the source. He is the Middle East analyst for the daily newspapers Makor Rishon and Yom LeYom, as well as on Israel's Channel 20. He is a frequent guest in the Israeli, Arab, and international media. Now, it is my pleasure and honor to present Dr. Mordechai Kedar, who will be speaking today on Israel and the Middle East in the coming 4 years. Dr. Kedar.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for introducing me. And of course, Mara de Asra, Rabbi Pont, thank you so much. And I also thank Eran Itzhak for facilitating this. And I see here another good friend, Hila Brog, and whom I met in San Antonio a couple of years ago when I spoke to Kufai, the Christians United for Israel, their summit in San Antonio, and I was invited by Pastor Hagee to speak there. I'm not sure that Pastor Hagee is the cup of tea of everyone in this congregation, but he found me somewhere and he asked me to come and speak to the gathering of the pastors or the leaders of the churches in San Antonio. One thing, Brenda, I didn't tell you that recently I became the vice president of a company, limited company, named Newsrael, which produced an application which brings news about Israel. Let me show you a very short clip, with your permission, about this. About this application. Here it is.
Israel, the Holy Land from the Bible, has come to life. You can now walk its beautiful landscape and be reminded of the ancient Bible stories where Abraham received the promised land from God, where King Solomon built the first temple, and where our prophets brought us God's words. However, too many narratives out there are telling a different story. Too many organizations and media outlets have targeted Israel and are serving anti-Israel agendas. Where is the newsfeed that can counter the flood of anti-Israel narratives and show the true face of Israel? Newsreel is the only 100% free, pro-Israel 24/7 multiple platform newsfeed in English coming directly from Israel. Newsreel reports the real news from a pro-Israel perspective for the conservative audience and all lovers of Israel.
This is myself.
Anywhere in the world. Newsreel features what Israel is all about, from exploring its beautiful landscapes to quotes from the Bible, from archaeological discoveries to Middle East analysis and opinion pieces by leading figures on burning matters such as Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, and their connection to Israel. From heroic stories of IDF soldiers to Israeli politics, Newsreel is bringing its audience the real story about everything that is happening in Israel today. This is the way to show the real Israel, the land that God promised to His people in the Bible. the innovative Israel that was Herzl's dream, a home to the people that the prophet Isaiah called a light unto the nations. Newsreel is already the main pro-Israel source of information for 100,000 Israel-friendly users. Our goal is to expand our reach to the wider global audience. Please join us in our quest to bring the real news to the whole world and spread the message of love for Israel. Please join our mission now. Download the Newsreel app for your cell phone.
Just a minute. Let me close this. Cancel. Okay. The Middle East in the coming 4 years. Well, let me tell you something. I have no idea. Because with everything which I studied in my life, I did not study prophecy. I have no degree in prophecy, and I'm not a prophet. כן, לא נביא אני ולא בן נביא. And I really don't know what will happen tomorrow even. So to talk about 4 years from today is a real challenge. However, and here comes the big however, when I look at the situation today in the Middle East, how people talk about the foreseeable future, you can already get a good feeling about how people feel. And people actually talk from their feelings, especially here in the Middle East. What happened in the recent 4 years, means the last 4 years, is that the main power which agitated the Middle East, Iran, was actually, I would say, I wouldn't say stopped, but definitely halted to a large degree because of the sanctions which were put on it by the Trump administration. And by the fact that the United States actually left the JCPOA. This actually brought the Iranians to the verge of bankruptcy, and their ability to spread havoc in other countries like in Yemen, in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, was very significantly limited, to a degree that Hezbollah, for example, in Lebanon, which actually controls the country, is trying for at least 3 years to find different sources of income by selling drugs, by smuggling all kinds of merchandise to all kinds of countries. And they make money because the Iranian source of money was dried out by the sanctions which were put on it by the American recent administration. The ability of Iran to send weapons to Yemen was reduced, not nullified, but reduced. And the same thing in Iraq and Syria. To a degree that some countries which actually are under the nose of the Iranians, especially the Emirates, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, which are right across the Gulf from Iran, some dozens of kilometers, that's all, dared to go forward with Israel, not only to peace with Israel, but normalization. Peace means something cold, which we have with Egypt and Jordan. What we actually achieved with Emirates and Bahrain, in addition to Sudan and Morocco, is normalization. Means everything included: tourism, cooperation, academic cooperation, arts, commerce, you name it, investments, you name it. Just like what Israel has with Italy, with the United States, or with France, or with Britain. To that degree, because they dared to do it, because Iran was, I would say, weakened by the American sanctions. Now, when the Zmirot, which come from Washington, are rather different, now you can very clearly hear that these people are very much afraid, because they hear more than once that the United States want to resume its part in the JCPOA, in the nuclear agreement from 2015, wants to lift the sanctions from Iran, and this actually what will bring Iran to a situation, economic situation, which will enable Iran to spread death and havoc as it did before let's say 3 or 4 years ago. And they are saying it clearly, the Emirates and Bahrain. Another thing, as you might know, Iran is not alone. Iran has an ally in the Gulf named Qatar. Let me show you the map, just to get the idea of how it works, from a geographic point of view, because the map actually gives the importance of Qatar in this equation. This is the Middle East, and let me show this. Okay, this is the Middle East. If we focus on this arena, this is Iran, Saudi Arabia, two enemies, very, very vile enemies to each other. Qatar is here. Qatar is a peninsula which comes out from Saudi Arabia. Qatar shares with Iran the biggest gas field in the world, which is here. And Qatar and Iran are half and half partners in this gas field. So Qatar has no other choice but to be with the Iranians, because if Qatar turns its back to Iran, Iran will take the whole gas and will give Qatar nothing, and Qatar cannot fight with Iran. Qatar is too small, Qatar is too weak, and Qatar can do nothing against Iran. So in order to appease the Iranians, the Qataris constantly represent the Iranian point of view. In addition, Qatar also supports the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, in Sudan, and as you know, the Muslim Brotherhood agenda is overwhelmingly against Israel, against any peace with Israel, let alone the normalization, even cold peace. They are against it. And Qatar supports them. They support Hamas. Qatar supports Hamas because Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood organization, terror organization, which came out from the Beit Medrash of the Muslim Brotherhood. And Qatar actually, by its media, especially the Al Jazeera channel, bashes Israel day and night as a kind of ideology. So Qatar is definitely with Iran in the same camp. So Saudi Arabia tried to educate Qatar for some years, but it failed because Qatar was supported by Iran, by Turkey, which is run today by Erdogan, who is Muslim Brotherhood thinker. So since Qatar was supported so heavily by Iran and Turkey, Qatar succeeded to sustain in front of the Saudi sanctions and blockade and whatever. And don't forget that Qatar is one of the richest countries in the world, so they had enough money to buy whatever they like and get it from the air or from the sea, in spite of the fact that the border between Qatar and Saudi Arabia was closed for over 3 years. So here we are. We have here two camps in the Middle East. Iran leads a camp with Qatar, Iraq, which Iran is deeply involved in the Iraqi arena, Syria also, where Iranians and Iranian militias are all over Syria, and Lebanon, which is controlled by Hezbollah, which is Iran long hand. So Iran actually already succeeded to spread its hegemony over the northern part of the Mashriq, of the eastern Middle East, means Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. And don't forget that Iran also had a very, very powerful militia, the Houthis, in Yemen, which recently was taken out of the list of terror organizations by the American administration. So here you have Iran actually engulfs Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel from the north with Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, and from the south through Yemen, which is like a grip which they try to catch the Middle East and to crash it from the north and from the south. Since they were weakened during the last 3-4 years, they couldn't carry on with this plan. Now, everybody is afraid that if the United States gets back into the JCPOA and lifts the sanctions from Iran, actually Iran will be emboldened again in order to continue with its plan to spread its hegemony over the entire Eastern Middle East, if not more. Now, how do I know that this is their plan? They actually say it out. They don't even try to hide this plan. I have a document which is right here. This document is a Daf Parashat HaShavua from 2006, which a unit of Tzahal succeeded to put its hand on. And there are many copies of this thing, so I could take it home. Actually, one of the soldiers was one of my students, so he brought me this document. And here it says clearly, of course, it's in Arabic, that Khamenei, the supreme leader, actually is saying in 2006 that the strategic depth of our nation, is the Iranian nation, and our revolution extends all over the Islamic region, because it goes all the way to Palestine, means Israel, to North Africa, like Egypt, Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. The closer Middle East means Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and so forth. Central Asia means Pakistan and Afghanistan, and the Indian subcontinent, because in India there are some 100 million Muslims. So he claims that these all the whole region, Mihodu ve'ad Kush, from India to Africa, is their strategic depth. You know, ladies and gentlemen, what this means, strategic depth? Imagine that I start running to buy all kinds of things, and I tell all the dealers that if there is no cover to my checks, you go to the strategic depth of my bank account, which is Rabbi Pont's bank account. More or less. This is what they mean, or Mrs. Edelson. Okay? This is exactly what he means by strategic depth of our nation and our revolution. Means he sees the whole Islamic world, Sunni world even, as the strategic depth of the Iranian. You could not, you don't need more explicit expression to describe the hegemonic dreams, no, plans of the Iranians, more than this. And they don't even try to hide it. It is printed black on yellow in the Daf Parashat HaShavua of Hezbollah, sometime in beginning of 2006. Ladies and gentlemen, there are thousands of such evidence, not to mention the nuclear military archive, which Israel stole in 2018, which was exposed by Netanyahu to show that the Iranians actually, although they denied that they actually have a military program, Israel proved to anyone who wants to come to see. And you can see all the diagrams and all the planning and everything in the handwriting of this guy, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who was mysteriously assassinated a couple of months ago in Iran. I don't know who did it, but blessed should be the one who did it, because the man was preparing an atomic bomb, not for America, and not for Britain, and not for France. You know exactly against whom. And we, who passed what we passed 80 years ago, we cannot tolerate such a thing. Unfortunately, at least one organization in the United States of America, the Association of the Physicists, you know, those who deal with physics, came out with condemnation to whoever killed that man, Fakhrizadeh in Iran. Means for them, for the American scientists, it is okay to develop a nuclear weapon when every day the people in Iran are shouting death to America and death to Israel. Well, for America, they might be more afraid because America has some more power than Israel. And America is further. And you don't mess with America. Anyway, especially not with such a thing. Israel is much easier prey for the Iranians. So those physicists in America condemn those who perpetrated this assassination against this criminal who was developing in secrecy a nuclear weapon. Not only this, as you know, Iran signed the non-proliferation treaty. Means under the NPT treaty, they are developing nuclear weapon. They cheat the world, they con the world, they lie upon the world, and unfortunately, the world doesn't learn time and again. And especially now, when everything is out, everything is exposed. It's not only this, Khomeini already issued a fatwa, psak halacha, a religious verdict, which bans developing nuclear weapons. So they say, how can we do it? He issued this psak halacha against developing nuclear weapons. So how can you blame us Iranians that we are developing nuclear weapons? Okay, this is what we call in Arabic taqiyya. Taqiyya means deception. And taqiyya in the Shi'i tradition is a very, very important and totally legitimate tool to use in order to conceal your real intentions, to conceal your real plans. And this is a well-established concept in the Shi'i philosophy, that taqiyya, at any time, in any situation where you have to use it, you use it. And this fatwa is definitely part of the taqiyya, part of the deception which they use in order to convince all kinds of people, naive people, that they are peaceful and their nuclear program is meant only for peaceful goals. Ladies and gentlemen, they even admitted that now they are producing a metal uranium. Metal uranium has no other use but nuclear weapon. So what else do we need in order to understand once and for all that these people are playing with the most dangerous weapon in the world, the most powerful and the most lethal weapon in the world. And unfortunately, people are trying to appease them, to go back into all kinds of agreements with them, to sign again, to join again all kinds of agreements which never were even planned to stop them, maybe to hold their program for some years. Ladies and gentlemen, we plan to be here forever, not for 10 or 15 years, as the JCPOA says. Even in the agreement of 2015, it is mentioned that this agreement is for 15 years only. Would you pay for a house only to find out that you bought it only for 15 years? Would you buy a house with a full price and after 15 it's not yours anymore? Who in the right mind goes into such an agreement? And unfortunately, what here in the Middle East people see, not only us, the Iranian danger is not only on Israel. It's on Saudi Arabia, it's on the Emirates, in Bahrain, it's on Kuwait, Oman, and Egypt, Jordan, all the countries. And therefore, what happened in the last couple of months, what is being made here in the Middle East is actually a coalition of Arab countries. It's not an official coalition, but it's factual coalition of Arab countries and Israel in order to speak to the American new administration, in order to try to make them rethink their attitude to Iran. I don't know what leverage these countries have over the United States of America. Apparently, very weak leverage, because Americans sometimes think that they, might is right. But if there is almost wall-to-wall Arab coalition with Israel against the lifting of the sanctions from Iran and resuming the American participation in the JCPOA, maybe the American administration will listen to other countries rather than Iran. Between you and me, I really don't understand. Iran is one country, while in the other side, you can see many countries. Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Israel, Jordan, Egypt, who clearly, openly, explicitly oppose any cooperation with Iran. So, what does the administration prefer Iran over this whole group of other countries? I'm not sure, but so far we don't understand really their considerations. Why Iran is more important than, you know, people started to say that Saudi Arabia is very much afraid of this new administration because of the issue of human rights. And the report about Khashoggi, the journalist who was assassinated in Istanbul in October of 2018. You know, women's rights abuse in Saudi Arabia. Okay, Saudi Arabia does have what to worry about when it comes to human rights. Yet, Iran, on the contrary, is not such a country which honors human rights more than Saudi Arabia. What? You know, there is a region in southwest Iran populated by Arabs. It's called Ahwaz. Ahwaz. And they are controlled by Iran. I don't know if you know, but Iran is a country with many ethnic groups. Let me show you the map of Iran, so you can see it. You know, it's even in English, so it's not even hard to understand. This is the map of Iran, the real map of Iran. The Persians are in the middle, are in the center, and they control other ethnic groups. Azeris here, who are not Persians. Kurds, Arabs, this is the region of the Arabs. These are Baloch, they live in Baluchistan. These are Turkmens. These are Mazandarinis, they're here. These are Gilyakis. I'm almost sure that you guys never heard about these peoples or ethnic groups, which are, let's say, 40% of the Iranian population. By the way, here you have the legend of some of these Persian, Azeris, Kurds, Arabs, Luris, Baloch, Kashkais, Turkmens, Gilyakis, Mazandaranis, Tailishis, and others. Okay? And this is Iran. They oppress heavily all these groups. The Baluchis are fighting for freedom for many years already. The Kurds are fighting for freedom. The Arabs are struggling for freedom. And how do the Iranians treat them? How do they treat the Arabs especially? By cranes. You know, cranes. Every morning when people go to work in Kermanshah, in Ahwaz, in the main cities of the Arab region of Iran, they see in the street a crane standing with a hand up, and some people are hung up in order to show everybody what will happen to anyone who opposes the Iranian regime. Every single morning. Does the mainstream media report about this? I'm not sure. Did ever the CNN brought any footage about this? I'm not sure. Fox News also. Because who cares if Muslims kill Muslims? Who cares? When in Iran, only in Saudi Arabia, people are very much worried about human rights. But in Saudi Arabia, nobody cares. About in Iran, nobody cares. And believe me, the Iranians are much more vicious compared to the Saudis. The way they treat the Baluchis, the way they treat the Kurds, and of course the Arabs. By the way, the Arabs consider their part of the land as the occupied territories since 1925. In their vocabulary, the occupied territories is them. They keep saying that the Palestinians should thank God every time, every day, 5 times, that they have the issue with the Israelis, not with the Iranians. Okay? So when it comes to Iran, all of a sudden, nobody knows about human rights problems. Only when it comes to Saudi Arabia, not to mention Israel. Okay? Now, I'm not sure this is hypocrisy. I wouldn't call it hypocrisy. I would give them the benefit of the doubt that it's not coming out of hypocrisy. I would say out of a lack of knowledge, because they are not aware of the fact of how Iran treats the minorities inside Iran. By the way, I think that one day will come and Iran will fall apart, just like what happened with the Soviet Union. As you know, Soviet Union was one state for like 70 years, and 30 years ago, it was divided to 15 countries, 15 states: Russia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Armenia, Ukraine, Belarus, okay, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all these countries. Okay, because they are now homogeneous states, rather stable. Okay, the Ukraine has 2 groups, so they are not stable. The same thing happened in Yugoslavia, which fell apart. Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro, okay, Slovenia. These are the countries which came out from the ruins of Yugoslavia. Czechoslovakia was divided to 2 peaceful countries, the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic. Will Scotland forever be part of the United Kingdom? United Kingdom with Welsh and the Ireland, very united, and of course the Britons. So this is the world. I didn't make this situation. I only draw your attention to the tendency of multinational states to fall apart at some point. Iran is no different. I believe that the powers which try to get freedom from Iran, like the Ahwazis, the Arabs, the Baluchis, the Kurds, and the Azeris especially, one day they will have their freedom. How it will happen, when it will happen, I have no idea, because as I told you, I'm not a prophet. But there is not even one big, means large, empire which lasted forever. Even the Austro-Hungarian one fell apart. And you can see today many countries which came out of the ruins of the Austro-Hungarian empire. Okay, so this is how the world works. Ethnicities are alive and kicking, and sometimes are alive and killing as well, when needed. So, to preserve the Iranian unity on the expense of those ethnic units, I really have no idea why the world keeps resuscitating this dictatorial, despotic state named Iran. Let it fall apart, just like the Soviet Union, and let those Arabs and Azeris and Baluchis and Kurds and many others, let's set them free. Why not? They want freedom. Why should they be oppressed with cranes under the Iranian occupation, as they call it? So, if I look at the Middle East today, and I try to assess how will the foreseeable future look like, what I see is that if nothing happens with, or nothing will change, the new administration's mindset, apparently Iran will come back to its status as it is war like 4 years ago, and will be able again to spread, as we say, havoc all over the Middle East. And countries are afraid. Look, there is maybe a good outcome out of it, because countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel might get closer, because both these countries see themselves as potential targets by Iran. And when you share the same enemy, you get closer. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So this might be, let's say, a positive outcome from the Iranian re-emboldenment. But I would give up on it. I would keep the relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia as they are today, almost nothing in common, if Iran does not come back to its power. And the Iranian empowerment or re-empowerment of Iran will actually be the axis of the events of the forthcoming, let's say, 4 years. If by miracle, Robert Malley, who was behind the JCPOA, and now he became again the negotiator between the administration and Iran, if he comes back and pushes the United States, the administration, back to the JCPOA, the entire Middle East might be a very, very big problem. And as much as I understand, it depends on apparently one person who is doing the work, running back and forth, sending and getting documents, and trying to push forward. And nobody really can compete with him, because he is the one who is in charge of this file. And he knows exactly what there is in this file. And I don't know if he knows how to deal with the Iranians, because the Iranians are excellent negotiators. They will do whatever they will achieve whatever they like. And as they did so far, except for one time. In 1980, when Reagan began his presidency, he succeeded to get the Iranians to do what he wanted. As you remember, right after the revolution of 1979, the Iranian mob assaulted the American embassy, which is totally forbidden according to the international law, and they caught some 50 American diplomats from the embassy, and they kept them in jail. You are not allowed, because they have immunity, but the Iranians kept them in jail for no less than 444 days. It started when Jimmy Carter was the president, and then he finished in 1970, in the end of, and beginning of 1980, Reagan came in. And Reagan, during his presidential campaign, said time and again that the first thing which he is going to do when he walks into the White House is deal with the Iranian issue. Now, the Iranian understood that he is going to flatten Tehran. That's what they were afraid of. So when he was standing on the lawn of the White House, pledging allegiance to the Constitution, Reagan, in the same minute, the airplane which carried these 52, I think, diplomats left the Iranian airspace without any payment, without any agreement, without any concession, without anything. Why? Because they believed that there is a credible threat made by Ronald Reagan, by hinting that he will do whatever needed in order to convince them to release the boys. Means to convince by you know what. And they took him seriously. And this is the only thing which can convince them to give up on their nuclear weapons as well. Because this regime, the only thing which can convince it is a credible threat. I already published it years ago in Jerusalem Post. The only thing which can work against the military nuclear program of the Iranians is a very, very short and clear message being sent to them by the President of the United States of America, saying, quote, "Dear Iranians, your time is over and your game is over. We don't believe even one word which you say, and you have exactly 1 week to get rid of all your facilities in this place, this, that place, and all list of places. And if you fail to dismantle even one place from this list and ship it out to us within a week, we are going to flatten you with the earth. Don't call us. We will not call you exactly a week time from now. You are surrounded. We are already warming the engines. Read our lips. We say what we mean and we mean what we say. Don't even try to get 1 second more than 1 week because you will not be given. Do it as of now. Ladies and gentlemen, the Iranians are not suicidal. And if they get such a message, clear as it is, and they believe that this threat will be implemented on the ground, if they fail to do it, they will comply because they are not suicidal. Only credible threat will work with these people. No agreement. They are the biggest liars in the world, as was proven time and again. Takia is part of their culture, and we should not buy this thing anymore. If the American administration addresses them in such a language, they will understand and they will do whatever needed in order to put an end to their military nuclear program. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no other way to convince them to do it. Not even sanctions. And Trump here was wrong. He had good intentions, but he didn't know what to do. If he read that article in Jerusalem Post, which I published with this warning, I believe he or any other American president, that yes, you could do it. And here I'm asking, what the heck America has the power for, if not for this? What, to fight with China? You're not going to fight China. To fight with Russia? You're not going to. If the whole American Navy, Army, Air Force was built for that, in order to extract the nuclear weapon from the hands of the Iranians, the American power is justified. Apparently, could be another country in the world which will do the same thing if America doesn't do it. I'm not sure, because I'm not a policymaker in Israel or anywhere else. But if this will be the last resort, maybe this will be the way how to persuade the Iranians to get rid of their nuclear weapon or nuclear program. And they are, in my view, as much as I read in the media, between 1 or 2 years away from a nuclear bomb. And once they get it, no state will dare messing with them because they have the best insurance policy, the nuclear weapon. We, the civilized world, should do whatever needed in order to make sure that this scenario of the Iranians with a nuclear weapon, when Allah tells them what to do, according to their view of religion, this is the most dangerous thing which could ever be in the world, even much more dangerous than the Soviet Union with a stockpile of missiles and nuclear weapons in Cuba. This is much more dangerous. And whoever justified what JFK did in those days in order to make sure that this danger goes away should treat the Iranian danger in no less seriousness than what JFK did in 1962. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hope that the world and those who can will do what they have to do in order to keep the world safe. And world safe, the world will be safe only if Iran has no access to nuclear weapon. Thank you so much. And I will open the floor for questions, for remarks, or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kedar. We have a number of questions in the chat that I'll present to you.
Thank you.
The first one, excuse me, the first one actually is from Brenda. So Brenda, I hope I'm paraphrasing correctly. That isn't the fact, even if the Iranians were to have a nuclear weapon, isn't the fact that the United States also has nuclear weapons, and supposedly the Israelis do also, isn't that enough of a deterrent that the Iranians would never actually use a nuclear weapon if they got it?
Rabbi, would you please put the part in about the fact that there's been no Iranian suicide bombers?
Okay, and that as well.
Part of it also.
There's never been an Iranian suicide bomber. And you said yourself the Iranians are not suicidal, so
as a society, as a state, as a society. By the way, there were many Iranian suicidals. You know, when they fought against Iraq between 1980 and 1988, they used everything possible in order to kill Iraqis. They were sending children on the minefields in order to blow up the mines so the tanks could cross the minefields. So what is it? To send the child to his death with a key to heaven on his chest, plastic key. This is how they convince the kids to run over mines in order to blow up the mines. And isn't this suicidal? And Hezbollah, who are the long hand of Iran, who many of them, you know, the Marines headquarters in 1982 and 1983, the American embassy in Beirut was blown up by suicide bombers, and of course Israelis as well. So the suicide bombers are in both Shia and the Sunni Islam big time.
Okay, another question from Irani Zak. What do you think are the chances of a war between Israel and Iran, or one of the Iranian proxies in the Middle East in the next 4 years?
Look, everybody talks about Israel as the one bomb country, because as you know, Israel is a small country, and the majority or big part of the population is between Kedar and Hadera, as we say in Hebrew, like Tel Aviv area, the broader Tel Aviv area. one bomb on that area and the whole country is gone. The whole country is gone. Infrastructure, electricity, industry, of course, and you know, Tel Aviv and Jerusalem is close to each other, only less than an hour drive. So one bomb in the east of Tel Aviv, you get rid of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem in one bomb. So Israel is very vulnerable. This is why, you know, in a nuclear war, the theory is that the second shot or the second bomb is already too late. You have to be the first.
Yeah, yeah. From Shmuel Varod, did the previous administration's sanctions on Iran, excuse me, deter or prevent the Iranians from advancing their nuclear plan?
They made it slower because Trump did not do the right thing. I'm telling you. Look, the sanctions were very good because the sanctions actually curbed the Iranian power to spread their terrorism in much more in Yemen, in Iraq and Syria. Imagine if they had the abilities which they had 4 years earlier, the situation in this country was much worse. And yes, the sanctions were good, but not good enough to convince them to dismantle their nuclear military program and to send it out and to ship it out. And only a credible threat, as I described, only such a threat can convince them to give up on their military nuclear program.
Yeah. Shmuel also asks, what's more dangerous, the Iranian nuclear weapons or Hezbollah rockets? We know that, you know, Hezbollah has been stockpiling rockets, rockets that are more accurate, longer range, could be potentially very dangerous for Israel. What's more dangerous in your opinion?
The longer range is not the problem. The problem is the accuracy of these missiles.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a whole project which they went through in order to increase their ability to pinpoint attacks on Israel, on all kinds of facilities and buildings or whatever in Israel. And this is the problem. Look, between conventional weapons like what Hezbollah have and non-conventional weapons which Iran has, I do prefer conventional weapons. Okay? Yet, a stockpile of 150,000 missiles in Lebanon threatening Israel, the size of this stockpile can be very easily compared to a nuclear hit. Because let's say if 1,000 missiles hit, let's say, Tel Aviv area, the devastation which it can create is almost like a nuclear bomb without the radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Without the radiation. But the destruction which it can spread might be tremendous. Okay, but yet Israel can, I wouldn't say deter Hezbollah altogether, yet Israel keeps sending messages to Hezbollah that if they dare to shoot at us, Israel will bring Lebanon to the Stone Age. And this is the expression which Israel uses. To the Stone Age means Lebanon will be destroyed totally.
Mm. We have another question.
Apparently they take us seriously.
Also,
yeah.
I don't know how much you can speak to this, but what should we do? What should we do more to make sure that our politicians here in America understand the Iranian threat?
Send around articles. I can send you the article from J Post, which I published. It is still valid. It's still this article has eternal shelf life until Iran gives up on its nuclear weapon. Okay, so I can send it to you. You can send it around.
Sure.
This is one thing. And yes, we have to speak, to talk to our politicians, to our congressmen, to our senators, to the media, to whoever is willing to listen. And this is why I actually started this. I became this vice president of Israel because I'm finishing in Bar Ilan to teach in half a year. I'm going on pension. And I'm now going into this big effort of Hasbara, of how to convince the world that the Iranian danger is not only on Israel. After they, if they succeed on Israel, the next step will be to Europe, and the Atlantic is not wide enough to keep them away from you guys.
Yeah.
And the Long Island is not a barrier or anything before they get to New Jersey.
Do you foresee other countries in the Middle East seeking to have normalized relations with Israel in the coming few years?
People talk about Oman, Saudi Arabia, maybe as well. Tunisia is talking about this already. There are some countries which clearly the leaders are speaking against it. But here I want to tell you something. Sudan, as you know, also wants to go forward with Israel, especially after it was removed from the list of countries which support terror by President Trump. Somebody in Sudan sent me a message, I correspond with them, that Qatar, the friend of the Iranians, is now spending money in Sudan in order to buy politicians against the peace with Israel, to convince politicians not to go forward with the peace with Israel by money. I don't know. Somebody once told me that everyone has a price. One needs 100,000, another one needs 1 million, and another one needs 10 million. But everyone has the price which will change his mindset. Okay, so this is what Qatar now is looking for Sudanese politicians to bribe them in order to stop the advancements of the relations with Israel. Now, Qatar definitely is doing it as the long hand of Iran. Qatar supports Hamas as the long hand of Iran as well. So here you see that Iran and its proxies, like Qatar and the others and the militias, are acting day and night against the Israeli interests and apparently the American interests as well. But they are doing it under the water. They don't talk about this clearly, so you cannot blame them for doing it. But they are doing it under the surface.
Okay, well, that was all of the questions that were in the chat. If anyone has any other questions, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap things up. Brenda, do you want to add any closing comments?
Well, my closing comment is to Dr. Kedar. Thank you for another fascinating lecture. And I learned so much, but I'm going to listen to the recording again because I want to recall every detail of what you said because it is so important to Israel and the whole Jewish community. And I will also say that God willing someday, will see you at our congregation in person. I truly look forward to that.
Thank you so much. But Brenda, one thing I want to correct. It's not a threat only for Israel or the Jewish people. It's a threat to Europe. It's a threat to America,
The whole world. Yeah.
the whole world.
Yeah.
So it's not that if you sacrifice Israel, so the alligator will be satisfied.
Right.
The whole world.
The whole world. Thank you
Okay,
so
well,
much for having me.
Dr. Kedar,
Yes, Rabbi.
thank you so much. As we did last time, we will, we'll make this recording available to the entire congregation. And just everyone have a good afternoon. Dr. Kedar, to you, Erev Tov, have a good evening.
Thank you.
And all the best. Kol Tuv. Thank you so much, Dr. Kedar.
See you soon after the corona.
Yeah,
Erev
eat
Tov.
out.
Bye.
Everyone, thank you
See
for tuning in. Brenda, thank you so much for your partnership.
My pleasure. as always.
Thank you, Brenda.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. Thanks
Everyone have a
for
great
information.
Thank
Wow.
you, Brenda. Terrific,
You too.
terrific presentation.